No more.
It's amazing how he could sit there and appear like he's, clean cut, nice jacket on, and talking very hopefully about his job, intelligent. It's amazing how much a human being can hide from another human being.
But careful as he was, Jeffrey Dahmer was about to run out of good lies. In July 1991, the city of Milwaukee discovered a serial killer, 31-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer. One man, Tracy Edwards, had managed to escape from the horrors of Dahmer's apartment and flag down a passing patrol car. When the officers entered the apartment, they found 83 Polaroids of bodies in various stages of dismemberment. There were more shocking discoveries in the kitchen.
There were 4 fully enfleshed skulls still there, sitting in a refrigerator. One of the officers said he opened the icebox. He heard a scream. It was only later that he realized that it was he himself who had screamed.
TV news cameras rolled as what was left of the victims was carried out. The 57-gallon drum filled with the torsos of 3 men. A freezer with dismembered limbs and flesh. Metal cooking pots with mummified hands and genitals. This time, there was no lie Dahmer could tell to save himself.
He was walking in a pretty defeated manner. His shoulders were hunched, his head was down, he was sweating profusely. He kind of had a faint, kind of a whining, like a baby crying noise about him.
At the police station, detectives began a marathon interview with the suspected killer. Dahmer at first blamed the booze instead of himself, saying he wouldn't have been caught if he hadn't been so drunk. But Dahmer was now clearly scared.
The look of terror and almost hysteria that he had on his face in the interrogation room that first night as he was coming down off the alcohol and finally realizing that the gig was up. He was caught. He did cry several times. He went into a rage. Besides asking to kill himself, he stood up and pounced around a couple times.
Once Dahmer sobered up, no one could guess at the gruesome details to follow.
He made this statement: when I tell you what I'm going to tell you, you're going to be famous. And I tried to say, look, Jeff, there's nothing that you can tell me that is going to freak me out. And he laughed at that. He said, you don't know what I've done.
Dahmer spent the next 6 weeks with the detectives, recounting the murders of 17 men, a 159-page confession. It seemed cathartic to Dahmer to finally get the deeds of the last 13 years off his chest. With the information from his confession, investigators went back to Dahmer's childhood home in Bath, Ohio. They raked up the shattered bones of Stephen Hicks, Dahmer's first victim. The Milwaukee County coroner started matching skulls with torsos, and the police began the sad task of notifying families. Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane. The issue of his sanity would be the sole question before the jury.
You know immediately that it's going to be probably an insanity defense. What can you argue? You can't claim self-defense. You can't say you don't know how those bodies got there.
Wisconsin had no death penalty, so if the jury found him sane, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. If they found him insane, he would be imprisoned in a mental facility. Dahmer himself couldn't understand why he enjoyed fantasizing about murder.
Jeffrey thought he was the devil. Jeffrey thought he was so evil that he was equal to the devil. And he knew there was something wrong with him, but he didn't know what it was, but he never categorized himself as being insane.
The man who entered the Milwaukee County courtroom in January 1992 appeared completely normal until the words of his confession were read in court by Lieutenant Dennis Murphy.
He related this was a person he really liked. He indicated that he had filleted his heart and kept it in the freezer, and he also kept his bicep. He indicated that he had eaten the thigh muscle of this subject, but it was so tough he could hardly chew it. He then purchased a meat tenderizer and used it on the bicep.
Dahmer's father, Lionel, sat in the courtroom beside his second wife, Sherry, stunned by what he heard.
No one softened the blow for us. No one told us, no one prepared us with any of these details. How could this be? How could I have not known about it?
Dahmer's crimes seemed to be devastating proof of insanity. What else could explain the actions of a man who had sex with the dead, dismembered their bodies, preserved their skulls, and ate their flesh, all for sexual gratification? But the law has a very strict interpretation of insanity. Dahmer's defense team had to prove two things. One, that he indeed suffered from a mental disease, and that it kept him from knowing right from wrong. Necrophilia, a compulsion to have sex with the dead, is recognized as a sexual disorder, but it does not make one legally insane.
He argued that the necrophilic drive was such that he could not control it. But we don't accept that in the United States as a defense, no more than we accept a pedophilic drive of the man who wants to have sex with children.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I understand you have arrived at verdicts in this manner.
In a 10-2 decision, the jury found Jeffrey Dahmer legally sane. Some relatives of Dahmer's victims sat quietly in court, others cried. Prior to his sentencing, they were allowed to express themselves before the judge.
Jeffrey, I hate you! I hate you! Nothing's out of control! Don't Jeffrey, I'll kill you! I'll get me, motherfucker! I can kill you! I can kill you!
Once order was restored, Dahmer spoke publicly for the first time.
I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate. I have seen their tears, and if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry.
Many questioned the emotional depth of Dahmer's apology, whether a man who killed so routinely had the conscience to feel remorse. The judge sentenced Dahmer to a 937-year prison term, but it would last only a few tormented years. Jeffrey Dahmer's final home was the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. His former residence at the Oxford Apartments in Milwaukee stood as a painful reminder of the lives that ended there. So in November 1992, it was demolished. In his prison cell at the age of 32, Dahmer's life became a conflicted introspection, trying to sort out the blame for his killing nature and seeking divine forgiveness for it. He had spent time in church as a boy and with his grandmother as an adult, but had lost his religion during the murder spree. Dahmer placed the blame for the murders on his atheistic beliefs and the theory of evolution.
He said, if it all happens naturalistically, what's the need for a God? Can't I set my own rules? Who owns me? I own myself.
Yet Jeffrey was still a contradiction, for he was always quite willing to blame the devil for taking over his soul. The serial killer wondered now what would happen to him when he died. Dahmer decided he wanted to be baptized. Evangelist Roy Ratcliffe was called by the prison minister to talk with the inmate in April 1994.
He was a very affable, congenial, likable sort of person. I always felt like I was dealing with a small boy in a grown-up man's body. He could get real excited and interested in neat or cool things that a little boy would get involved in.
1 month later, Dahmer was taken to the prison medical center, where he was baptized in a whirlpool.
On the way, we walked by other prisoners who were coming by with mops and brooms and various cleaning devices, and they looked up, and the only one they saw whom they recognized was Jeff, and so they called out in a very friendly, banter, "Hey, JD, how's it going?" And he called back, "I'm going to be baptized, this is great."
Dahmer appeared to be making a remarkable transformation in prison.
He would ask questions. He would say, but wait, what about this? What about that? So uncharacteristic of the earlier years. Go back to senior year in high school, you wouldn't get any of that. He was so interactive and so concerned about our welfare. You know, he was reaching out. He was rehumanizing.